people will often ask about how you make a great podcast about something that is as complex as Formula One. You ultimately are going to need 3 people, one with some knowledge, one who can present, and I guess one just to bring a name. This is going so well. Welcome to the Fast and the Curious.
Well, Buxton's here.
Thanks, Will. Hello and welcome back to the Fast and the Curious with me, Betty Glover, Christian Hugill, our paddock princess, and our team principal, Greg James. The show that, of course, takes you inside this mad world of Formula One. Now, as well as doing our race debriefs, we like to get in the studio, don't we, guys? We like to talk to some of the biggest names in the sport. And today we've got one hell of a treat for you, haven't we?
I think we have, yeah.
Are you guys excited?
I'm very excited.
He's sitting here next to us now.
Here he is.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you went, nah, I'm not excited, actually, to be honest?
It'd be quite rude, wouldn't it?
Not
I mean,
not
it would
bothered.
be fair. No, it wouldn't. Welcome, Will Buxton. How are you?
I'm great, mate. How are you?
Good. We're very excited. We've assembled to talk to you.
Well, it's lovely to meet you for the first time. It's nice to talk to you not over a Zoom call
Yeah.
in the middle of the night in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And I see you all the time, mate.
I can only apologise.
You're looking incredible.
Oh, bless you. You're a lovely man. Thank you. It's always lovely to see Will
You've
Buxton.
been on our podcast quite a few times, Will,
Yeah.
because once Christian slept in and missed the episode, so it's
Christian-
just you and Greg,
Christian didn't sleep in. Christian had an operation.
and that was it.
I was he's literally unconscious.
Yes, slept
there's
in.
There's a subtle difference.
But you did sleep in.
Was he sleepy or under anaesthetic?
Under anaesthetic. I was drunk.
You lazy.
Lazy Christian, for
Literally.
God's sake.
The evening before I had an operation.
And then you came
always
on.
got an excuse.
Always an excuse, honestly. And then you came on when the Lewis Hamilton news broke that he was going to Ferrari.
Yep.
So we went through all of that with you.
Yeah.
So you're basically, part of the furniture.
Yeah. Well, the thing is about you two, Christian and Will, is that you two are lifelong Formula One fans, and you've liked it before it was cool. That's one of the
Take
things.
that.
And you have sort of you've become the face of Formula One globally, and then people know you from Drive to Survive. That's kind of a mad journey, isn't it?
You see, I always thought it was cool. Because to me, it always was cool. I didn't realise that it wasn't cool to sort of 90% of the population. I just always assumed everyone loved it. No, mad, mate, mad. I was thinking about it the other day. It's 30 years since I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life, which was to talk about Formula One. Exactly 30 years. And yeah, to sort of be sitting here and get to talk about it on the weekends, and I did my 300th Grand Prix last year, and now written a book, and it's like it doesn't feel real.
We should do the question that was asked to Max Verstappen.
Oh, what's that?
300 more? And he was it 400 he'd done? No, 200 or something. And they said, "Would you do 200 more?" And he was like, "No."
Yeah, no.
But you could do 300 more.
Absolutely not.
Come on.
You
Actually,
could.
You can do 300 more.
Well, with the current rate of races, you'd get it done in a decade.
Yeah.
Just over a decade.
Well, at the way it's going, you get it
okay.
done in about 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I
I
started
can-
when it was 16 a year. Like 16 was the whole season, and 11 or 12 of those were in Europe.
Oh my gosh, it's
one-
changed.
It's one of these gigs that has got a lot harder as it's
Oh,
gone
yeah.
on, because there's now basically one a week. Apart from this last 3 weeks, which has been mad. What's going on? Why is there such a huge gap
I've
again?
no idea, but I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. You can stay in your own bed for a bit.
Yeah, well, decided during the summer break, went away with the family and my then 1-month-old daughter, and I had forgotten how difficult going away with a baby is on holiday. It's not the relaxing break that I had become used to over recent years, but it was wonderful. So I need another break. I need another holiday, and this
Is that why it's been put in? Is this for you?
This is solely for me. For
You
the
knocked
fact
on a
that
door somewhere at
and-
F1 HQ.
and-
And went,
yeah,
Can we just...
Hey guys, I need a break.
Yeah.
guys, could we just?
But also, like all media workaholics, which we all are, you've gone, we've got a break here. I could go and promo my book. And this is
Exactly.
perfect. This is the perfect time for you to have some time off to go and work.
I don't think I even realised that there was a break when Viking said, we want to release it on October the 10th. And I was like, well, that's like a month after it's being released in the US. Why are we doing that? They said, oh, it just makes more sense to us from a timing perspective. I was like, okay, fine. And now it's like, oh, this actually works out really well. Like, I've got time off. I can do it. I'm not going to be away for the next, 3-4 weeks.
Your new book is an illustrated history of Formula One. It's called Grand Prix, and it's beautiful. And I'll get to this in a second. But can you tell everyone, because people might not know, what was the first moment you fell in love with this sport? Do you have a moment? Do you have a race? Do you have a driver? Do you have a car?
Senna was my hero when I was a kid. I don't remember the first Grand Prix I ever saw. And I don't remember really the first memory that I have of it, other than maybe sort of a flash of red and white underneath the trees of what would have been Monza or Hockenheim or something like that. It just kind of permeated my soul over my kind of youngest years. It's not like my dad was a massive fan of it and got me into it, or my mum or anyone like that. I went to a hill climb when I was really little, and that was the first time I'd seen racing cars, and it was really thrilling and exciting and terrifying and scary. But F1 itself, it was Sunday lunchtimes. It was Murray Walker. It was grandstand. That's why I fell in love with it. But it was Senna. Senna was my hero.
I read somewhere that you travelled around in a camper van around Europe. Was that when you decided, right, I want to work in this sport. I want this sport to be my life. How do I make that happen?
So I've been really lucky. I got a bit of work experience out. I just left uni, got a bit of work experience at Formula One magazine, which was the official mag of the sport back in the day, in the early 2000s. And I'd been doing some writing for grandprix.com for free, kind of gigging myself around. And they said, you want to have a couple of weeks work experience? I went in and I ended up working there as a staff writer for 2 years, but then we got shut down with a week to go until the 2004 season started. So I was 23 and I just lost my dream job. I had nothing and I just didn't know what I was going to do. And jumped in a camper van and decided I'm not going to let this dream go. I'm going to drive to every race that I can. Offered to write for the Metro newspaper for relatively little, which meant that most days I had to choose between, do I buy petrol today or do I buy food today? And most days it was petrol, because I had like a finite period to get to the next Grand Prix.
And how did that taste?
Pretty bad. Nice one.
Silly
very
boy.
well done. Yes, relied on the kindness of teams and fellow journalists to kind of feed me up, fatten me up over Grand Prix weekend, so I could survive for the next 4 days to drive to the next race.
All you need is the hospitality pass, and you've got endless food.
And they were they were really, really kind.
So that was a benefit of, you said that a lot of the races were in Europe at the time.
Oh my God,
so you could just drive around Europe.
Yeah, what would have been, it was April, we were in Imola, and then you only really had a mid-season break that went to Canada and the United States.
Right.
And then it was back in Europe again until I think Japan, Brazil finished the season off. Something like that.
You couldn't do that now. You'd have to hire a plane, wouldn't you?
You couldn't do it.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when I got into properly freelancing and traveling and doing the whole season, even 15 years ago, you had to clear 40 grand before you turned a profit, because that was just how much you needed to spend on hotels and planes and everything else.
Wow.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah.
How much money it cost. But yeah, as a freelancer, as a youngster, that's how much you had to set aside before you even turned a profit.
I think you'd do it though. If push comes to shove, you'd be like, I'm getting a camper van, I'm driving to Abu Dhabi.
Oh, without question. Yeah, I'd drive a camper van to the
Imagine how
Saudi
long it
Arabia
would
Grand
take you
Prix.
to drive the entire season.
Yeah,
I'm driving to Singapore, I'll be sometime.
yeah.
But I'll do it because it's my dream.
Where's Christian? He's driving to Saudi Arabia in a 1998 beaten up caravan.
I imagine though it would be a very fabulous caravan, and I think that wouldn't go down that well over there.
No. They'd look at that caravan and think it's very well done interior decor-wise. This is quite suspicious.
This guy's got style.
Yes, I think there might be a gay man in there.
I had great stickers on the outside of my camper van, because Jordan back then had this whole kind of Sex Pistols writing on the side of their trucks. It said "On Tour 2004," and they made me some that were the right size for my camper van.
Phenomenal.
It was really
With a
cool.
Jordan liveried camper van.
Yeah,
You've got a Jordan behind you on the shelf.
Oh, but yeah, a little bit. It was a little bit later than that.
There you go.
So did you do all of that on your own then? You didn't have any mates?
Oh,
Good ask, Betty, I thought.
pointed
Thanks,
question.
mate.
What were you doing? Did you not have any friends at school? Did you not?
No, none on the road either.
leave it like that.
I just sat in a camper van, eating a cold tin of beans, and that was it. Yeah, did it on my own.
Wow, that's
Did
so
it on my own. And before the days of sat-navs. I didn't even have a TomTom. Remember them?
genuinely.
Didn't
I
even have a
actually
TomTom.
I wouldn't survive.
I had
get lost.
proper road books, and in the printer from the printer in the media centres at the races, I would print off from the website via Michelin.com. You could put in your starting point and your finish point, and it gave you the directions that you had to follow, like step by step by step. So I'd print them out and then just drive, listening to lots of. What was I listening to? I was listening to a lot of Jamie Cullum and Jeff Buckley and Tom Baxter, and that was essentially my soundtrack.
Great music.
That was
good road
Oh,
music.
and Busted.
Oh, classic.
Yeah,
Love it.
So good times. Bit rogue.
The sport has obviously changed so much, but from a sort of like PR perspective, I guess it's changed loads because it went from perhaps being a little bit sort of closed off to then suddenly being like, you know, Drive to Survive, it's open, so many new fans that have come on board. How have you seen that change? Because you've obviously been in it.
Yeah,
throughout the whole time.
it's massive. The drivers used to be, you know, they were robots. They were PR robots, and everyone always said, you know, you never get any idea of the personality of who the drivers are because it's so closed off. Everything we did had to be copy approved from the teams. Everything you wrote, if you were writing features. But I think Drive to Survive's had a big role to play in that. Just the advent of social media has had a huge role to play in that, and the fact that you can talk directly to your fan base now, and that they can talk directly to you. I think it's had an effect on everyone, from a media perspective. And the drivers do engage more, and they do show more of themselves. I think. And I keep getting in trouble for saying this, but I think the drivers are aware that they're marketable assets. They're aware that they're brands and they have a brand to play up to. But absolutely, they give so much more of themselves and are so much more kind of giving and real than they ever used to be. I think Montoya was the first one that really started to break that mold because he came over from the States into what was quite a kind of cold and steely PR-driven world of Formula One, and he was just Juan Pablo. He was just huge fun and huge personality all the time.
And for those who are new to F1, Juan Pablo Montoya drove for the Williams team in the early 2000s, and as Will says, he was very, I am who I am, and I don't particularly care what you think of me, on and off track, because he also gave a bit of stick to Michael Schumacher on track, and he was a huge personality. It was
second
like,
race in Brazil, he was like elbows out, pushed Michael off the road, and was like, "Yeah, I'm here now. This is how it's going to be." The photographers told me a great story about Juan Pablo when he arrived in the Formula One paddock. He and his wife Connie, beautiful Connie, they sat on the steps of the Williams motorhome for like the first 2-3 race weekends until the photographers got bored of taking photographs of them, and then they didn't need any more photos. Rather than hiding away from the cameramen, they just sat on the steps of the Williams motorhome and were like, "Yeah, we're here. Take as many photos as you want."
If ever you want cheering up, while we're doing Juan Pablo Montoya stories, you can tell me and you are together on a podcast, Will. Put in YouTube Juan Pablo Montoya cameraman, and there was a brilliant bit where there's an F1 media scrum. And while he's walking through the paddock, and one of the
they're following Bernie.
They're following Bernie Eccleston, aren't they? But
yeah.
One of the cameras gets too close to Montoya, bashes him on the head. And
Doesn't even see him walking there.
Doesn't even see him. And Montoya looks at him and goes, "You idiot! You broke my head."
Yeah, but it's in Juan's voice.
Yeah.
So, and Connie's like, "No, Juan," and he's like, "You idiot! You broke my head," like that. And it's so great, and it's really high pitched. And Connie's trying to stop him from decking the cameraman. It's like,
it's brilliant.
It's a great moment.
Is
Great
this the
moment.
same Juan Pablo Montoya that was an IndyCar champion and an Indy 500 winner?
It was.
Was he the last driver to successfully transition from Indy to Formula One?
He was.
Greg, where have you got that information from?
It's top of my head, really.
Right.
The sad thing about Juan Pablo Montoya is that although he only raced in Formula One for 5.5 years, he is widely regarded as one of the best Formula One drivers of his generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. Who wrote that?
That's page 183 of Grand Prix, the new book from Will Buxton.
Wow.
This is a beautiful thing, by the way.
That's a great segue, by the way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's not his first rodeo.
He's a
No,
pro.
this
This
can
is
tell.
a-
He's good at this.
This is a beautiful thing.
Thanks, mate. Well,
So
thank
I
you
s-
for your kind words that adorn the back page.
I saw the PDF a few months ago. I got sent the PDF. I'm a huge believer that sport is for everyone. No one should ever feel left out just because they've only just got into it. Will Buxton is knowledgeable and authoritative, but always welcoming of new people who might fall in love with his favourite sport. This book is perfect for newcomers who want to take their F1 obsession to the next level, and for the diehards. Greg James, broadcaster and author.
There you go. You could tell. I mean,
Love it. Love it.
You just read out your own recommendation to Will with the book in your hand.
Yeah, but people are listening to this.
No.
Yeah, this is a podcast.
When's it out? October.
October the 10th.
Yeah. But it's really interesting to tackle this as a project because it's an illustrated history of Formula One. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
And you've got to try and make it make sense to people and make it not a switch off.
Yeah.
But actually, when you look back at all this, it makes the current era make even more sense, doesn't it?
That's what I really hope to do with the book, because I think there's a lot of information and certainly historical context that we kind of just take for granted in the paddock that people are going to know. When we talk about, even talking about Michael Schumacher, there's going to be an entire generation who don't know who Michael Schumacher is.
It's a long time ago now.
It is a long time ago. Let alone looking back to your Sennas and your Prosts or Jim Clark. Or when we were in Zandvoort a few weeks ago and Max had the opportunity to level Jim Clark's win record at Zandvoort. If you've been watching Formula One for a couple of years, how are you supposed to just intrinsically know who Jim Clark was? It's impossible. So I was very aware that everybody had their first race. Everybody came to this sport and knew nothing. Even Roger Benoit, who's done like 900 Grand Prix and is the doyen of motorsports journalists, there was a day where he knew nothing. So you can't just expect people to know what they don't know. And you shouldn't also, in this, can be quite a toxic social media world, you shouldn't just kick people for being a new fan and not knowing the full context of history. No. So I wanted to do something that would be like a guide, a quick reference kind of book. So if somebody wants to know who's Jackie Stewart, who's Graham Hill, then they can just flick through, and it's 400 words, 2-minute read on each driver from each decade, and just get the basics really, just so they're armed with that knowledge.
We were talking before about who would read this, and obviously it's people who know the sport.
Who on earth
No,
would
but there's
read that?
people who know the sport really well, people who've loved it for a long time and have just dived in a bit more. But as a quick reference, amazing. But also, I think kids will love this.
I hope so.
In a way that
illustrations
Yeah,
are
the
so
illustrations
pretty.
are so
It is
beautiful.
beautiful.
But
Yeah,
kids
Davide Augusto, Brazilian illustrator. We were really lucky to find him, and I think he's done a beautiful
Oh,
job.
it's
Amazing
fantastic. It looks sensational, and also, but it doesn't just look pretty, and you think, oh, it's just a pretty looking book. Greg's right, because I've been reading it in bed of an evening. Well, I won't lie to you, and I'm about halfway through, and even we were saying at the start of the podcast, me and Will are cut from the same cloth. I've been watching it since I was a boy. So much stuff I didn't know. So much stuff that's lovely to refresh. It's also new fan friendly. It looks brilliant. Honestly, I was lucky enough to be sent this just before it was released, and I was like, this is beautiful. And I used to take such joy when I was a kid. Will, do you remember the ITV F1 annuals?
Yeah, of course.
So when
Yeah.
ITV covered the sport, they used to release a book every year, and I always collected them. And it was nicely put together. And there is just something. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted with Greg. You're an author. There's something lovely about having a nice collector's thing, and it just looks beautiful. It took me back to my days of collecting the ITV F1 books.
It's a great coffee book table. When people put those really
book?
Coffee book table.
coffee book table,
Coffee
coffee
table
table book, coffee table book. When people put those really pretty books, and then it's one of those.
I'm hoping that one day I will walk into my dentist's and it will be sitting on the table in the dentist. That's kind of that's the hope.
But it's got a Guinness Book of Records feel to it.
That's a lovely compliment.
You see?
Thank you.
And when I was a kid, that was my favourite thing. At Christmas, I'd be like, get me
yeah,
the Guinness
same.
Book of Records,
Yeah.
please.
I had the ITV F1 annual. You had the Guinness Book of Records.
Well, I just wanted to see like, who's
I
got
did as well.
the longest,
Every Christmas got a Guinness Book of Records.
longest toenails in the world.
Yes,
Or like,
they were. That was always
That.
the one, like longest fingernails, go curling
oh, yeah, the
around.
biggest freak ever.
yeah,
that sort of
some
thing.
woman in Brazil or something with
But-
long fingernails.
Yeah.
But this has got that because you go, I don't know enough about the history of, Ferrari or Lotus, or when were they around, or like when did Lotus become whatever? And so it's got
I really enjoyed. So in each, we split it up decade by decade, and so you get a brief kind of explanation of how the decade played out at the start, from the perspective of like the politics, the technical regulations, the calendar, how they scored points, all that kind of stuff, and then we go champion by champion. Then one guy who wasn't a champion but could have been, a bunch of other drivers, teams that defined the era, and one great race. But what I loved doing all the teams from era to era was McLaren's logo has changed pretty much consistently every single decade, and making sure that we got the right logo for each decade
Oh, I
was
love
really
that.
fun.
Like a
Like
bit of
proper
that.
nerdery
God,
on
'cause
that.
the nerds will be out. They'll be after
Oh,
it.
yeah. If we got the wrong one for the wrong decade.
Oh.
You know everything about Formula
I
One.
wouldn't go that far.
But have you, when you were writing this book, did you find anything that you learned and you were like, oh, wow, I never knew that?
Loads. It was either refreshing stuff that I knew, or what I loved the most was actually sort of deep diving into the pre-F1 histories of drivers who I'd never had the honor of being able to cover. So guys from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And actually looking at how they made their way to the sport, because there's fascinating stories in there about, Graham Hill started off as a mechanic and didn't know how to change gear in a car and all these kind of things, and and then ends up being until Ayrton Senna came along, the greatest driver that ever raced at Monaco, multiple Formula One world champion, and the only guy in history that's completed the Triple Crown of Monaco, as he saw it, Monaco, Indianapolis, and Le Mans. Although some people see it as the World Championship. It's those little things, those little stories of how they got there. That's what I really, really enjoyed learning.
And there's a bit of a bridge here, isn't there? Because you've done the book, which is great for people like me who've been watching it for years. It's also very new fan friendly. One of the things I love about F1 nowadays is, like, when I was a kid, I had a Ferrari backpack, and people used to ask me what it was, like going to school.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like the only Formula One fan in the school. And that's not the case. That won't be the case now in schools up and down the country, across the world. A massive part of that is because of Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
So I want to dig into your involvement in this a little bit, because for those, if there's one or two people listening who've never seen Drive to Survive, Will is Mr. F1 explanation on it. How did you get into this role when you're in the Formula One paddock before it's had this boom? How did your involvement in all of this come about?
So I just started working for Liberty Media. I was working in the United States,
Which owns the commercial rights to F1.
Yes, as the pit reporter on US TV, and then Liberty bought the sport and decided they were going to have a massive push into digital broadcasting, and they wanted me to be a part of that and be at the heart of that. So I jumped at it, and one day out of the blue, the boss of the commercial department at that time, a guy called Sean Bratches, who'd been with ESPN and was a brilliant visionary leader, the kind of guy who walks around the office of 200, 300 people, knows everyone's name, knows their partner's names, their kids' and pets' names, their interests, and this is like one of the top 3 people in the entire company.
Sounds creepy, but I'm
No,
sure
but
it's
he
lovely
was
in the right way,
like
yeah.
he had that knowledge, and he seemed to really care. I'm one of those people that you would do anything for.
Right.
You just at the drop of a hat. Yes, Sean, whatever you need.
Yeah.
And he said, I need you to go and do some interviews for a Netflix show that we're doing. And I'm like, no worries, Sean, absolutely. Thinking I'm going to go and interview the drivers because that's my job. That's what I do. And I get there and they're pointing the camera at me, and I wasn't expecting them to.
So you didn't even know
No,
that you
no,
were
no,
going to
no, no.
be
I had-
doing this role.
I had no idea that I was going to be in front of the camera. So season 1, I'm there in like this, kind of like zip up sort of sweater, and I haven't shaved, and my hair's all over the place.
Because you've just been in the office.
Because no, it was pre-season testing, and he was just like, yeah, I need you to go and do this. So I went in, zipped up, and they were asking me questions, and I looked like a bum, and but they fire these questions at me, and the brain cogs start turning of, right, you've got to think of the answers here. You've got to give something that is going to be interesting. Also, don't get yourself in trouble. Don't swear. And so my normal patter, my normal kind of free-flowing speech suddenly became very syncopated and very drawn out and thoughtful, as it's literally the cogs turning that you're witnessing. And so I became known for the heavily pregnant pause. And that's literally just me trying to think of how do I...
drama.
Yeah, but how do
It's
I...
drama, Will.
It's become drama, but at the time it was, how do I say this and not getting...
That's good.
And so that was that.
But Betty, you do a lot of live sport TV as well, and there's an art form in talking like this, because
Whilst your
you're
brain is
just
going-
hearing
like,
there's been a goal at
super
Ellen
quick.
Road, and like you have to,
Honestly,
that's
I haven't quite mastered it yet, but it's hard
so hard.
work. Oh my God. I could be on air for like, let's say, 90 minutes, and I'll come off and I'm like, can't think. That must be like you, but on steroids, doing that job.
The Drive to Survive sittings are 5 hours at a time. So I do 5 or 6 a year, sat on a very uncomfortable chair in a very dark room with a very bright light in your face.
what's wrong with these people? Get them a nice chair and some lights.
Yeah.
It's Netflix money.
This is comfy. This is nice. It's question after question after question after. And I know some people think that it's scripted. If it was scripted, it would take an hour and it would be super easy, and I wouldn't land myself in so much trouble.
Do that then.
You don't land yourself in trouble though.
Oh, I do. A bit.
What's the trouble? What trouble do you get landed in? Because I just think it's fun.
Well, yes, but sometimes they'll ask for. Obviously, you've got to be honest about stuff, and sometimes some things will rub people up the wrong way, or they'll use things a certain way.
Yeah.
Season 1, Perez furious with me because there was a bit all about pay drivers, and they'd asked me, "What's a pay driver?" So I explained what a pay driver was. And
What's a pay driver?
Yeah, what is a pay driver?
so a pay driver ostensibly is somebody whose path to Formula One has been eased by the sponsors that they bring with them.
I see. Yeah.
So, Checo's always had really phenomenal backing, and it doesn't detract from his phenomenal talent, but it has certainly helped to ease cogs along the way of getting him into some seats. As it would do for anybody. Niki Lauda was a pay driver, for heaven's sake. He had bank loans that paid for his racing and allowed him to get to Ferrari. Anyway, but they asked me what's a pay driver, so I explained what a pay driver was, and then they painted it exclusively with pictures and footage of Sergio. And I said, I never said you were. I just explained what one was.
This reminds me of the really nice chat we had with Steve Jones,
Yeah.
where he was talking about how he balances being fun and interesting and finding out stuff for the viewer,
Yeah.
but also nurturing those relationships and avoiding friendships. Actually, he said he avoids friendships. How do you manage the paddock as a human to human, but also having to report on bad days, good days, scandals of late? How do you manage that? It's difficult, isn't it?
It's really, really hard, particularly after, I've been doing this for nearly 25 years now. And it is hard. But ultimately, I think people recognize that you're just doing your job. And I'm not there to make enemies, but I'm also not there to make friends. I'm there to report what I find out. Increasingly, my role has been to give an opinion as well, and that's not going to please everybody all the time. But I've got to be honest in what I think of a certain situation, and have reason for doing that. So you can't. It's really frustrating because people will say, "Oh, you're biased this way or that way," but what you end up finding is that the people who say you're biased a certain way, 3 weeks later, apparently you're biased completely the opposite way, which means you weren't in the first. You're just giving your opinion.
How do you find that to deal with as a broadcaster? And also, your day job, if you like, is being the main presenter of F1 TV and F1's in-house TV coverage. But the Drive to Survive role has definitely, made you so much more well-known, particularly across social. And that brings with it accusations of bias. It brings with it mocking. How do you find that to deal with?
I really struggle. I'm actually going on a golf trip this week with the boys on this little thing, and I've promised I'm just going to turn my phone off because I've actually hit saturation point to the extent where the last few days I've just been really sad, and my wife's like, "You cannot continue like this. You've just got to get out of it." I started doing meditation, started doing transcendental meditation, which has been a huge help because I started getting anxiety attacks. I take it so personally. I can't detach. And it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. I saw a brilliant interview with Salma Hayek, and she was talking about how you deal with online hate. And she started screaming at this camera in Spanish. And then she's like, "Did you understand any of that? Because if you don't speak Spanish, you didn't understand any of it. It's just a crazy woman shouting at you." She said, that's online hate. Just think of it as a crazy woman shouting at you in a language that you don't speak. And because if you don't give it value, if you see it as a foreign language you don't speak and you don't give it value, then it can't hurt you. But after a while, it's just, you know what? I just need some time out from people telling me they hate me. Because all I'm trying to do is, and unlike through this book, I'm just trying to share my love of this thing and tell people how brilliant it is.
And also, people forget that there's real people at the other end of it. So, again, I've had more of this season than I've ever had before. And, like, Will, I've seen you get it online. It's like, you said at the start of the podcast, Will, I know Will Buxton. I work with him at Grand Prix weekends. Will is the nicest bloody man you could ever wish to meet. I know that because I actually know the guy. And it's such a weird thing. Betty, we've spoken about this before as well, that you get so much stick as a broad...
Here's the crazy thing though, right? So when I started in sport 25 years ago, I was at the magazine, right? The official magazine of Formula One. And I was in charge of the letters page. How many letters do you think we got a month to the official Formula One magazine expressing an opinion about which drivers were doing well, which drivers weren't doing well, the subject matter that we'd covered in the previous month's magazine, the opinion articles that we'd written in the previous month's magazine. And bear in mind that the best letter every month won a PlayStation at the time. So it was a pretty good prize, right? International magazine, how many letters a month?
I'd guess about 100.
That's what I was going to say, about 100.
If we got 10, it was a good month.
Wow.
And I'm not even joking.
I had that magazine, but I didn't write in, so I'm part of the problem.
Right.
A missed opportunity to get a PlayStation.
Yeah,
to get a PlayStation.
say.
There were some months when I had to send one to my mates because nobody had actually sent a letter in.
I had that magazine.
So we once gave away a Toyota, what was it, a RAV4.
Oh, yeah,
a
great
Toyota
car.
RAV4. We got less than 50 entries for a Toyota RAV4.
What year was this?
This was 2002, 2003.
I wish I'd known this at the time.
So
got these magazines under my parents' bed at home.
When you had to put pen to paper, write your thoughts down, fold it, put it in an envelope, address it, put a stamp on it, take it down the road and put it in a box and send it in, no one bothered.
It's just ag, isn't it?
Now that you have this ease of being able to throw something which is an opinion, is a thought, is whatever, with no real effort. And I don't think people realise how heavy the weight of their words can be. And something that is literally thrown away with no thought. You know, when you had to put thought into it, no one bothered.
Just on the sport itself, though, do you still enjoy it?
Love
You
it.
still like covering it?
Love
you
it.
still love it? It doesn't dampen your love
come
of it?
on.
You don't get too
Like-
exhausted by it? And
No.
you want to keep doing it, obviously.
Yeah, I love everything about this sport, and the drivers are young enough to be my kids, but they're still my heroes because they do this incredible thing that I
Yeah.
could never do. And no, listen, the day that I walk into the paddock and I don't get that electric shock of joy, I will stop doing it because there'll be somebody else who will deserve that far more and who will do a far better job. No, I love every second of it. It's the great. It's come on, like it's not a job.
yeah.
It's the greatest joy in the world.
Where do you think Sorry, Betty, just quickly. Where do you think the sport is then? Where are we? And where's it at? Do you think it's in a good place? Where's it going?
I mean, it's currently got, latest estimate is like 1.5 billion viewers worldwide, which is up 50% on what it was before the Netflix series started. So, and 1 in 3 viewers of the sport have been watching for 5 years or less, which is an incredible statistic when you think about it. But it means we have this huge new audience of 500,000 people. 500 billion people, sorry. 500 billion people.
It's growing all the time.
Gee, 500 million people, this new audience. And then you have the movie coming out next year as well. What's that going to do for global viewership figures? It's an astonishingly good time for the sport. The racing is incredible. We might have a new world champion this year.
Well,
And so you talk about bias, and people get angry and they go, "You're so pro Lando. You're so pro Lando." I will give you one very good reason why I'm not pro Lando. I'm going to have to rewrite the book. Because Lando doesn't have a chapter in there, and if he wins, because he's not a champion.
I'm gonna faint.
He's not champion.
That was camp,
So
wasn't
dramatic.
it?
So
That was camp.
So I really
Sort of
would.
my thing
I
on
would.
this
I'm
podcast.
absolutely fine if Max Verstappen wins the title this year, because it just gives me a little bit longer before I have to write the Lando chapter in the book.
Do you think Lando could win?
Yes, and I think he's going to.
Do you think he's going to?
I've been saying it since Austria.
We've been getting carried away.
When was I saying it? I might have been saying it before Austria. When was I saying it
I
from?
think you were around there as well. Yeah, I think
It was when he came up second in the championship, which was the Austrian Grand Prix weekend.
Yeah.
And I drilled Stella on it in the pit lane when Piastri passed him in the sprint race, and I was like, "What are you doing? Why are you letting him take points off Norris?" And it's taken from Austria to now for Lando to get back to the same points gap he had then.
It's happening.
I genuinely think it is.
Yes.
Has this season shocked you as much as it shocked us? Because
Absolutely.
we started this season and we were very much like probably going to be sort of same
and
again.
you'll see it on the next season of Netflix, because literally the first interview of the year, it was like, so, we've had the first couple of races now, expectations for the year, and, deadpan, yeah, it's another season of Red Bull dominance, isn't it? Because that's what it looked like.
Well, we shared an office in Bahrain testing.
Yes.
And the mood in that, I bang on about Bahrain testing on this podcast all the time, because my first opportunity of a pre-season test, soaking up all the sort of expectation, we stood there on F1 TV and were like, oh,
It's, yeah.
they're a step
They're a
ahead.
mile
They're a step ahead. Who thought we would possibly be sat here in October talking about a Lando Norris potential title win?
Do you remember who I was banging on about in Bahrain pre-season testing that was going to replace Lewis?
Logan?
No, you were banging on about, because you came on this podcast, you were banging on about Kimi.
The day that Lewis signed for Ferrari.
You were on this podcast.
You said that on the pod,
yeah.
because that was when I was first like, oh, okay, right, we're going to take this kid seriously then.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
kid's really good.
You called it from minute one, and we've credited you on this podcast many times since that appearance.
Did you
for that.
predict Colapinto was going to be as good?
I don't think James Vowles predicted that Colapinto was going to be as good. What a shock!
What a shock.
What a shock! But then the kid was sixth in Formula 2 when he got the promotion. How good does that make someone like Hadjar or Maloney or Bortoletto? How good potentially might any one of them be?
It felt like we'd reached a little bit of a point on that front where teams were opting for continuity and experience. You had then, this is no criticism of any of these drivers, but you had the likes of Haas opting to stick with Kevin Magnussen and Valtteri Bottas at Sauber. Do you think the likes of Ollie Behrman and Franco Colapinto coming in and doing a good job will make people a little bit more willing to make changes as we come into the future, come into the next few seasons?
And I think you have your generations. And the greats of each generation hang around, and the rest kind of make way. Fernando was the best of his generation, and he's still there. Then there's that kind of crossover where Lewis is the next, and he's still there. Your next generation are the only ones that still remain from that are your Hülkenberg, Perez, Ricciardo, Bottas. And I don't think any of them have. Well, we know Daniel's out, but the others don't have long. And so then that whole generation's gone, and you have your young generation of your Maxes and your Charles and your Carlos and your Lando, and then you have the next generation
We're
coming.
already seeing the next one, aren't we?
Yeah, and we're seeing the next generation.
And they are good.
But what that means is that your Carlos, your Lando, your Charleses, they have to step up to that next level to be someone that doesn't get left behind and edged out.
Yeah,
you
of
have
course.
to be a Fernando, a Lewis, because you've got your Max. So how do you avoid becoming a Daniel, a Valtteri, a Checo?
Wow.
Well, the
You've got to
pressure
become
will
great, haven't you?
Completely.
The pressure will increase next year on Alex Albon with Carlos Sainz next to him. It's increased this year with Colapinto next to him. Just one example.
Yeah, and when you've got those young kids coming through, and it used to be so frustrating because I was press officer for GP2, which is now Formula 2, and then was commentator for the series, and it used to be so frustrating seeing talent after talent hit that championship and not make it through, and almost all of them ended up in Formula E and racing brilliantly in Formula E and making a wonderful career for themselves in Formula E or in the World Endurance Championship. And you're like, how is Formula One missing these guys? How is Formula One missing these potential generational talents? And maybe now they're looking down and realizing, we could have taken a chance. We should have taken a chance because the Ricciardo, Lawson, Tsunoda, Perez roundabout, that's not over just by Liam being in the seat for the remainder of the season, because you've got Hadjar on the outside looking in, and you've got Lindblad on the outside looking in, who's their Formula 3 guy, who will only be 17 next year, but the FIA made the change to the regulations this year, meaning that 17-year-olds can now race in Formula 1.
Oh my God.
So I think you can add any number of names into that pile.
All of which adds pressure on the likes of Perez.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, of the new crop then, give us your Will Buxton predictions.
Ooh.
Who do you like the look of? Who's
Right.
nice, first of all? Who's
Yeah.
interesting, and who do you think is going to be potentially a world champion?
Oh, they're all great. They're all really nice. Ollie's an absolute sweetheart. Kimi is just really, really nice. Jack Doohan. I
Lovely
love Jack.
Yeah, I like Jack.
He was on the
Jack's-
podcast a couple of weeks ago.
He's super cool, isn't he?
Yeah, he's great.
He's
Such a
very
great guy.
cool.
We've had him as co-host for a bunch of our shows, and
Yeah.
we're really happy for him, but desperately sad that we lose him as a co-host because he's phenomenal.
He's one of the few to have started his punditry career before he started his F1 career. He will
Exactly.
do an F1 career, then he'll go right back to it because he's a brilliant broadcaster.
He's a brilliant broadcaster.
He's very chilled as well, isn't he?
and
Very relaxed.
he's effortless, and you'd get other team bosses coming onto our shows, and he'd just fire questions at them.
Yeah.
So Zach, what were you doing with the strategy today?
Yeah, he's
Oh,
great.
And that is like, I love how punchy you are.
Good
I
at
love
explaining
it.
stuff as well.
Brilliant at explaining stuff for whether you are a 30-year expert or if you are
Yeah.
brand new to the sport. Brilliant at that.
He's got the Rosberg sort of gene.
Yeah.
Where he just says the mad question.
He's great. He's absolutely great. Yeah, I love Jack. I think the one that the expectation is highest on is Kimi. And Toto really believes in him, thinks he's a Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton type, once in a generation driver. And look, long and short of it is they gave Lewis a 1+1 contract because they wanted to open up the opportunity to bring Kimi in. You don't give the greatest of all time an exit clause unless you think that the kid that you're potentially going to replace him in is very, very special.
Wow.
Do you see special sort of personality traits in Kimi that really impresses you? Because when we first interviewed Oscar, Greg was obsessed with just how still Oscar is and calm and just still.
Which became sort of a big part of how he's known for driving.
Yeah. Do you see any of that in
yeah.
Kimi? Is there anything that really stands out to you?
I don't know him well enough yet, and I've not seen enough of him close up to really be able to tell that. And it's so difficult to tell from the outside because who drivers are outside the car is very different to who they are inside the car. Ricardo always said 20% of the person he was out of the car existed inside the car. There was so much of him that was different. Vettel, prime example of someone who was sweet and lovely and honourable out of the car, and inside was just cutthroat.
Alex Albon's got a touch of that about him.
They-
Quite
they-
funny and
Oscar-
silly. And
Oscar does as well.
in
They
the car, so
all have-
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all because you have to pull the helmet on. And
Game time.
Jackie Stewart, really famous example, 3-time world champion in the late 1960s, early 1970s. In 1970, Formula One had its only posthumous world champion, was Jochen Rindt, who died in an accident at Monza. And Jackie went to the medical centre and saw his friend dead. Came back to the pit lane, was crying his eyes out, was qualifying, pulled his helmet on, got in the car, set the fastest lap he ever had at Monza, got out of the car and started crying again. They have this innate ability to just flick a switch when they pull that helmet on and get in the car and just be completely different animals. It's astonishing. It's one of the reasons I just love this sport and I love these drivers is their ability to be so superhuman when they get into the car. Just incredible.
Oh.
Will, before we let you go, we ask any of our guests in the studio to do a bit of admin for us.
Okay.
Would you mind signing our helmets, please?
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Yeah, who've we got on the
The
helmet?
last people to sign the helmet were Alex Albon and Logan Sargent, I believe.
Oh,
Nice.
lovely.
So there you go.
I think we've got Bernie Collins on there. We've got Chloe Grant.
Will, you've signed the helmet and it looks beautiful.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for letting me sign it.
Oh,
Much
not-
appreciated. And thank you for the plug for the book. It's the you've got the American version there. The British version does have Greg's quote on the actual back page.
Oh yes, I got sent the.
Did you get sent the
I
American
got
version?
sent the American version.
Oh, so that's got tyres spelt wrongly in it. It's got tyres spelt the American way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
But the English version.
Oh, I hadn't seen
No,
that
I
there was
did
a
ask them to
difference.
send you the English version.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, there's an
Somebody will be
English.
fired for that, don't worry.
There's an English and an American version of
So
the
there's
book.
me and Gordon Ramsay on the back of the English
I
one,
love
and Brad
that
Pitt
you've chosen
and
those
Lindsay
two.
Vonn on
Lindsay
the
Vonn,
American
Olympic
one.
gold medalist on the American one. Brad Pitt, what does he say? Who needs Google when you have Will Buxton, the most comprehensive, all-encompassing book on F1 to date? A joy to peruse. He doesn't say the word peruse.
He actually wrote that. He wrote that himself. There was a
Peruse.
there was a PR team that had written
says
one for him.
peruse.
And he said, and he was like, I don't like that. And we actually had to hold publishing for 48 hours because we were waiting on Brad's final
I love that.
self-penned version.
Oh, that's nice. Anyway, whatever version you've got, it's a triumph.
Thanks, mate.
It is.
And
It's
congratulations, and have a
Appreciate
great
it.
rest of the season.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in person.
Are you coming to Vegas this year, or shall I talk to you via a
We could
Skype
do it by the
call
hotel again,
Yeah.
via Zoom if you want. That'd be fun, unless we manage to get out there somehow.
My highlight of
I'll be
Vegas
there.
last year was the discovery, because I've not really done Vegas before, was the discovery that they have vending machines which sell nothing but cake.
Oh my God, I'll be going to a cake vending machine.
Best thing about Las Vegas is cake vending
Well,
machines.
why don't we make a pact now that you and Will, Christian, will be in a hotel room after the Vegas Grand Prix?
All right, well, we can do that, can't
Yes,
we? We
sounds
can make
great.
that happen.
Or
Sounds
record it
great.
live in a casino.
Oh,
How about that?
That'd be
Eating
good.
Eating
vending
cake.
machine
Eating vending
cake.
machine cake.
Done. Love it.
That's it.
That is a
Perfect.
podcast in and of itself.
Will, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Well, you know Will's book's fantastic. Do you know what I also think's fantastic?
Yeah.
NordVPN.
Oh, for God's
Yeah,
sake.
we've got to talk about NordVPN.
Yeah, do you know
guys.
about NordVPN? You up for it? You into
I would
NordVPN?
like to know more.
Do you not? Right, you're travelling around the world the whole time.
Yeah.
My associate here, Christian Hugo, is going to tell you exactly why you need Nord in your life.
Well, we use it, Will, because
we actually do use it
We
as well.
actually do use
Oh,
it
all the time. I love
all
it.
the time because it's a must for any F1 fans or authors or broadcasters heading to races for the rest of the season. Because you can change your virtual location to keep up to date with all of the TV and radio that you like to watch when you're at home, when you're away, working on big sporting events. And if you are planning a trip, which you often do, Will, you could use it to help save money when you're planning said trip, because some flights and hotel fees, I don't know if you knew this, change depending on where you book from.
I did not know that.
So changing your location when you're sorting your logistics could help you spend less.
What's the best location to choose?
It depends
where
flight
you
to
are,
flight.
where you're going to. So if you change it to where you're going, then you get the local deals there. You see.
That's smart.
But genuinely, I mean, this is an
Wow.
advert, but we do use Nord, and I use it all the time.
That's
for when-
really
if
clever.
I'm
I
going
do
away
use it all the
somewhere.
time when I'm away. I do.
So do I, and it's also safe. It's really safe, Will. So I
this- I've
don't
asked
know
this
if you were
before.
worried about your security, your internet security, your data security. You need NordVPN because it protects your data.
If you wanted to buy it,
I think I do.
we could help you get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan.
Tell me how.
Well, you go to nordvpn.com/TFATC, and our link will also give you 4 months on the 2-year plan. And even if you didn't like it, there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the description of this episode, Will, but you will love it. I
Wow,
guarantee you'll
Christian,
love
that sounds almost too good to be true.
it. No, it's not, Will. And to prove it's not, it's nordvpn.com/TFATC.
Nice.
Does that stand for the Fast and the Curious?
Yes, it does.
It's all making
Clever.
sense.
We'll be back very soon. And Betty, who's coming up in this studio very soon?
Oh, well, you have been a fabulous guest, but we've also got another fabulous guest coming into the studio. One of the legends of the sport that's no longer in it. Gunter Steiner is going to be on the
cool.
podcast.
I thought you were going to say no longer with us. I was like,
No
that
longer
would
in
be
the
a get,
sport.
wouldn't it?
Get
Yeah.
the Ouija board out.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Juan Manuel Fangio, fresh from his appearance in Will's
Oh,
book, is
God.
with us on the podcast.
Gunther Steiner isn't dead, and he'll be with us on the next episode
Good
in this
Lord.
studio. Thank you for watching and listening. The Fast and Curious hopefully will return. Will, you're now free to leave.
And if you've got any questions at Fast Curious Pod, let us know. Let us know what you're thinking. Ask us some questions. Will, thank you.
You're very welcome.
You've been amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Is it
They're
too
waving.
Is it too soon to make a one man your Fangio reference? Is it has enough time passed?
I think it's okay.
That's good.